Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is fashion, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Faisal. Faisal, thank you so much for the suggestion. Now let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this word as a verb. The first way you might encounter the verb can mean to make into a particular form or a required form. Related to that, the second definition here is to use materials in order to make something for a particular use or for a particular purpose. We're going to see some examples of this in various sentences as we go forward, but really here we're talking about creating and making something. For now, you should know that fashion is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms fashioning. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. The base verb, fashion, ends in a voiced N sound. This means when we add the ed ending, we're just going to make a D sound. We're not going to add an extra syllable when we pronounce it. So the past tense and the participle form of our verb should sound like this. Fashioned, fashioned. Okay? Let's move on and look at a couple phrasal verbs. Our phrasal verbs here are not all that different in meaning, but I thought it would be good to have a few more examples. So one phrasal verb you might encounter is to fashion something into. And here we're describing the action of using something as either maybe a template or a model for the way in which something else is created or developed. So an example of this might be, the author fashioned her clever short story into a hilarious movie. So here what we're describing is using a maybe shorter piece of work as the model or as the main idea, and from it creating something else new. And in this particular sentence, it's a movie. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to fashion out of. Again, the meaning here is similar. We're using something else, either as a template or a model to create or develop something else. So an example of this might be, we fashioned seats out of logs that were left along the trail. So really what we're saying is we sat on logs instead of carrying maybe folding chairs with us or other devices or things to have sort of a formal seating area, right? We used what was available. Now let's continue using our verb of the day, and we'll review a couple verb tenses as we do it. Today we're going to start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. And the nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So if we make an affirmative or positive sentence, what we'll do is start with the subject, and then we're going to use that ed form of the verb. Let's look at an example. Early hikers fashioned a rocky pathway that led to incredible views. Now, this particular sentence doesn't note a specific time, but that might be part of a longer passage, some text that's where someone's maybe describing this beautiful hike that they took and how it was created or how the pathway was made. Now let's move on and review the simple past tense in negative sentences. Again, our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is, but here we're going to start with our subject. We'll use did not and then the base verb. So we're not adding ed in the negative. Here's another example. The director didn't fashion this motion picture with the stodgy, elitist Shakespeare purist in mind. Okay? So again, we're back to creating. This sentence might be using some words that are a little bit unfamiliar, but what it is describing is sort of how someone used a particular Shakespeare play as that model or as the template for a new production. Movie here. Sorry, it says motion picture. So this was the idea, but they weren't making it for the people who maybe have studied Shakespeare, love his work, and really like sort of older traditional productions, right? I imagine this is someone who has updated it, maybe made it set in the present times or maybe even the future to be really different and creative. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, start with did, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. Again, notice you're not using the ed form of the verb here in your yes or no question. Let's look at another example. Did they fashion the vessels for royalty? So generally, again, the sentence or question is asking about making. So maybe we're talking about some boats or some ships here, and sort of were they designed with the very wealthy king or queen in mind. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences with be going to. This is most commonly used when people discuss their plans. And this is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our structure. Okay? So here we're going to be using a present form of be. And there are 3 forms of be in the present tense. This means if your subject is I, you'll use am, going to, and then the base verb. But if your subject is you, we, or they, use are, A-R-E, going to, and then the base verb. Finally, if your subject is he, she, or it, use is, going to, and then the base verb. So we're not going to be adding any special endings or suffixes to this particular verb when we're making simple future sentences with be going to. Let's look at an example. Students are going to fashion a figure from clay. So really just another way to say they're going to make or create something from maybe a block of clay. This might be a teacher's plans, maybe for some sort of summer programming, like an art camp. Now let's talk about making negative simple future sentences. Again, pay attention to your subject. Use the form of be that matches, then not going to in the base verb. Here's another example. She isn't going to fashion dolls and toys out of the corn husks. So here we're kind of talking about leftover materials from a corn harvest. And in this particular example, we do not have plans to use them to make something else. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with your form of be. Whatever form of be matches that subject, and the subject comes next. Then use going to in our base verb. Here's our last example. Are they going to fashion something out of the scraps of fabric? So here we're talking about maybe small strips of cloth. Maybe they've been cut away from other projects, things that are being made. And again, we're asking, do you plan to make something with these leftover pieces? Now, let's spend a moment talking about some words that are related to our verb fashion. And the first word we'll discuss today is just the noun form of this word. The noun fashion has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. It also can have a few different meanings. So one way to use the noun fashion is to talk about the prevailing style during a particular time. So an example of this might be, how would you describe fashion in the 1980s? Here we kind of want to know. Many times this word fashion is specifically referencing clothing, but it can be other things as well. Sometimes the way we style our hair, even things related to makeup, but sort of what's considered to be popular and generally accepted as popular. So here we might be thinking of certain colors, certain styles of clothing. Okay? Now, the word fashion as a noun can also be used to refer to specific garments or pieces of clothing that are considered to be in style. So an example of this might be, are you someone who always wears the latest fashions? So that's describing, right, the garments that are in style. A third way to use the noun fashion is to refer to a mode of action or a mode of operation. An example of this might be, why do some crowds move in an orderly fashion while others become a chaotic jumble? So here, what we might be talking about is a group of people who maybe sort of decide amongst themselves, okay, we're going to form a line or a queue, as it's known in various parts of the world, and that would be their mode of operation, kind of progressing one at a time, versus maybe just everybody trying to push forward or push their way ahead. Okay? Now, another word you might encounter is the adjective fashionable. There are two main ways we could use this adjective. The first is to describe something that is characteristic of, or influenced by, or maybe even representing something that is current and popular in trend or style. An example of this, right? Maybe you've asked friends as you've considered what to wear somewhere, which of these outfits is fashionable enough for the party? Right? So kind of like what looks current and modern, what's going to help me fit in. A second way to use the adjective fashionable is to describe someone who's dressing or behaving according to whatever is currently in style or on trend. An example of how you might hear this used, she's my most fashionable friend. So this might be somebody who's constantly updating their clothing so that they're wearing really what's most current. Okay? If you've been a regular watcher of my videos, you're going to realize this is not an adjective that describes me. In fact, there are probably videos of me wearing this exact same outfit from 5 years ago. One more thing for us to discuss, and it's the phrase in fashion. So you'll see this used to describe either people or things that are popular and considered to be attractive in the present time. And the thing about this noun and the adjective in this phrase here is really that what is in style is something that's always changing, right? It's usually not popular for long extended periods of time. It might become popular for a while, then not. It might become popular again in the future, but it's really about trends and popularity. So an example of that phrase, he only wears things that are in fashion. Right? So another way of saying he's wearing the trendiest or most popular styles of clothing. Thanks again to phrasal for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.